The boys and I used to be inseparable. We were more than friends, more than a team. We were like brothers. I don't mean to brag, but those of you who had been part of a sports team know what I'm talking about. When you're dedicated to playing professionally and your life is training, traveling, and competitions, it's only natural that those spending the most time with you become your new family. A professional sport can consume so much of your time. We even spent more time with our coach and trainers and teammates than we did with our own families and girlfriends, but, well, I'm not here to complain about this. My name's Leo. I'm a professional water polo player. I started practicing water polo when I was 10 years old. By the time I was 13, I was already playing for the regional team and, well, with time, my friends and we moved to the regional adult water polo league. We constantly had to travel, as I mentioned before, but I want to talk to you about a specific event. One that happened during one of our trips to a competition. It was the trip that just completely shattered our team. See, this trip happened in the autumn of 1997. Our team traveled to a place far up north. I can't even remember the name of it. We arrived 2 days before the competition, as is often normal in order to get familiar with the place and get to know where you're going to be competing. Now, this competition wasn't as fancy as the others, and, well, not the others that we've had before, but it wasn't going to have any coverage, and therefore some of the guys, unfortunately, just weren't taking it too seriously. Oh, and when I say coverage, I mean like media coverage, stuff like that. It doesn't matter. We even tried to convince our coach to send the backup players only, instead of the main players, since most of us had planned to go to a party and hang out with friends or see family, but it just wasn't possible, and, well, we were forced to go anyway. When we were on our way to this place, my friend Nolan started making fun of how boring the town where we were was going, and how lame the hotel looked. I remember Nolan even saying something like, "Who has even heard of this town before?" And Ethan, another teammate, replied that he had. Politely, I asked him what he knew about it. Ethan then said that he knew something weird had previously happened in the town. And when he first said that, everybody was like, "Oh God, here we go again." Because Ethan was obsessed with learning about crimes, the paranormal, and just pretty much any sort of creepy shit that he could get his hands on. So I asked Ethan to tell us what he knew, and he proceeded to say that there's a lake in the town where people don't go once summer had passed, but not just because of the freezing Canadian weather, but because some people have disappeared there. The cases were apparently a very long time ago, and in the span of 5 years, at least 3 drunk men who were around the lake got lost. And people had the theory that they got in the lake and eventually drowned or had an accident while being in there. Perhaps they fell asleep and caught hypothermia. And perhaps they were just too drunk to swim. I don't know, it was hard to tell. Then, somewhere in the 1930s, a group of teenagers decided to enter the lake. All of the kids went into the lake. Well, they died. Except the little brother of one of them, who was 5 years old, followed them and just kind of lurked. He stayed along the edge of the shore. He told people he had seen the teenagers drowning, but he said it seemed as if someone was trying to kill them. He said the kids kept screaming, trying to escape, but something from below seemed to catch them all, one by one. Something fast, but he obviously couldn't really explain what it was. The kid was 5, and so the story itself is murky at best. So after that, people in town started to become cautious and were told to be careful swimming in the lake during the fall, as all the disappearances always happened between September and December. But some people even prefer not to swim there altogether, in the summer months and whatnot. And besides, who goes swimming pretty much after September anyway? It gets way too cold this far north. Whenever Ethan told us stories, I would then go and try to find information about it. And he always gave us the right information about the stories, although sometimes, by doing my own research, I could have a better picture of whether or not they were real or fake. But this time, since we were away from home, I had to wait to look for information on it. Although I must admit that I was very interested and intrigued about this lake story, particularly because the lake was so close to the hotel that we were staying in. When we finally arrived at the town, we immediately went to the hotel. Now, surprisingly, the hotel was even closer to the lake than I had thought. So we were at the reception, waiting for our rooms to be assigned, and we looked through the window, and Nolan joked, saying that we had to go test the water at the lake to find the mysterious creature. We were being quite loud, and so the receptionist heard us. He then stopped what he was doing to tell us that it was forbidden to get into the lake at this time of year. And of course, now, Nolan, being himself, laughed. He asked the guy, is the lake monster going to get us? He asked in a joking manner. No, but the water is not safe around this time of year. Some people have drowned before, so be careful. Now, I must say, I was surprised to find that people had, in fact, died in the lake. However, Ethan's story about the lake creature didn't seem too real. When Nolan mentioned the lake monster, the receptionist just looked at him as if he were completely stupid. He also didn't seem like he was hiding anything, so it seemed like the death of those people had been completely normal and ordinary. Well, as ordinary as someone drowning can get, I suppose. After we left the things in our rooms, we went to the place where we would be competing. We practiced for a bit, and then we came back to the hotel to finally have a rest. The boys and I had planned to go out for a while to see what the town had to offer, but I don't know. The other guys and myself were just staying in the room. Ethan, Nolan, Arnold, Mike, and I were just so tired that we just decided to stay in for the night. Now, the other 6 guys, however, decided to go out. And our coach normally goes out with us when we explore around, especially during the night. But that night he had an important dinner with the sponsors of the event, so he couldn't go out to supervise the other guys. Coach left at 8 p.m., and the other boys, around 10 o'clock or so. And the rest of us stayed in the hotel. Mike, Arnold, Ethan, they decided to sleep early. And Nolan, who was the only one who had a phone at the time, stayed in the lobby talking to his girlfriend while I decided to wander around the hotel. I was getting a bit bored, and I just couldn't sleep. So I decided I might as well walk around the hotel for a little bit. And as I was walking on my own, I heard a loud scream. Now, I got scared when I heard it. I tried to find where it came from, but I couldn't find anything. And then I heard another scream. It was also a man, but it sounded like a different person. The scream, however, was clearer. It came from the wooded area behind the hotel. I wanted to go and see what was happening, but 2 things scared me. First, going into the woods on my own. And second, the fact that the lake was not too far away. My knees started to shake. I kept hearing men screaming, and I tried to decide whether it was a good idea to go and see or not, but eventually, after a couple of minutes, the screaming stopped. All I knew at that moment, I did not want to be there. And so I ran back into the hotel. Luckily, I wasn't far from it. I had just ventured outside a little bit. As soon as I entered the room, I woke up the other guys and told them what happened. Mike was completely unbothered and kept sleeping. Nolan was still on the phone, and only Ethan and Arnold heard my story. Ethan seemed slightly concerned. In fact, his first response was to say that perhaps the creature of the lake had killed more people. And at that time, I must admit, I was thinking about that too. Ethan and I started talking about calling the police or letting the hotel management know about this, but Arnold told us it was a waste of time and that it was probably some drunks around fighting or just being dumb. The truth is, when we arrived and were driving through town earlier, we did see a couple people walking in the streets with a couple bottles of beer, so this theory wasn't that bad. Eventually, Ethan and I just let it go. The next day, we were woken up by our coach, who came to the room just furious, angry, asking us where the rest of the guys were. We told him that we had no idea, because, well, we didn't go out with them. He said none of the other guys were in their other rooms, and in fact, the beds looked completely intact, as if nobody had slept on them. At first, this behavior didn't worry most of us, since sometimes some of the teammates did that. They'd go to a party and they didn't show up until the next day. We waited for them for a few hours, but eventually we had to go to practice to the same place where we were the day before. And, well, the practice was almost pointless since the team was incomplete and we were missing our goalkeeper, but we did what we could. We spent almost the whole day at this place getting to know some of the sponsors, and the coach tried to make something up to justify the other guys missing. The guys that I were with were taking the disappearance of our other teammates so lightly, but I couldn't. For some odd reason, I started associating the screams I heard last night with my teammates. I expressed this concern to my other friends, but they didn't believe me, claiming that once we got back to the hotel, the others would be there. But once we finally got back that evening, they still weren't there, and this is when the coach and the rest of the guys started to get worried. Nobody at the hotel had seen the rest of my teammates, and it was already getting late, and our coach decided to go to the police with Mike. Nolan, Ethan, and I stayed back at the hotel as we had strict rules of not to go anywhere. However, as time passed, we started to get more worried. I pointed out the screams I heard last night. This time, Nolan and Adolf paid more attention, so they came up with the idea that we had to go to the woods to see if they were there. Ethan and I obviously thought this was a terrible, terrible idea, but we ended up getting convinced by them. And so, well, we left the hotel and walked around the woods looking for our friends. Going to the woods didn't seem scary or intimidating for the rest of the guys, but Ethan and I were feeling very uneasy. We just wanted to leave. Nolan and Adolf kept insisting for us to go to the lake. Come on, we're just gonna go check if the others are there. They just kept on insisting. I didn't want to go, but I felt as if I had an obligation. And so I ended up agreeing and going with the rest of the guys. In a matter of minutes, we were at the lake, and all of a sudden, we heard someone coming. It was a group of 3 girls, just absolutely gorgeous girls, by the way. And as soon as we saw them, Nolan walked toward them and introduced himself and the rest of us. The girls smiled and seemed flirty, although they refused to tell us their names. Nolan told them where we were from and asked them the same questions. Here, the girls answered. I felt too nervous. I just couldn't stop thinking about our teammates, and also the fact that we were so close to the lake just made me nervous as well. Then the girl suggested for us to get into the lake. I was quick to say no thank you. The other 3 guys looked at each other, and I could tell they were hesitant about getting in the lake but at the same time, well, they wanted to impress the girls. Isn't it forbidden to get in there? Nolan asked. Not at all, said one of the girls. I heard some people died in there. Ethan questioned. Well, a couple of people have, but they were stupid. One of the girls replied. What about the creature that lives in the lake? I stepped up to him and I asked him, and the three girls then laughed at my question. There's not a creature in the lake. Don't be silly. Nothing will happen to you if you get in there. On the other hand, if you get in, well, you'll have an excellent time. The girl added as she began to undress. The other two girls followed her and decided to take off their clothes too. We'll skinny dip and do as you want if you come in, they said. Now Nolan and the other guy did not hesitate. They did not even think about their girlfriends back at home for a minute. They took off their clothes and got in the lake. Ethan was also taking off his clothes and about to get in there when I asked him if he thought this was right. But he was so hypnotized by the beauty of these three girls that he just told me to stop messing around and get in the lake. Ethan followed the rest. Once Ethan was in, the three girls got into the water as well. They jumped perfectly into the water, but disappeared after that. 30 seconds later, they all showed their faces again, but this time, they didn't look the same. Their beautiful faces now looked older, but instead of looking like princesses, they looked like rotting corpses. Their pale skin turned green and gray. Their incredible smiles were just now awful set of rotting teeth that were pointed at the end. How did you do that? Nolan asked in fear. We'll answer if your friend comes and plays, the three women said in perfect harmony. But even their voice had changed now. Instead of being soothing, now it was raspy and coarse. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here, Ethan said as he tried to get out of the water, when suddenly, a giant tentacle quickly grabbed him. Now, that's not the oddest part. This tentacle came from one of the girl's arms. All of us just screamed as we saw him getting purple and struggle to breathe. Nolan and Arnold tried to get out as well, but tentacles coming from the other two women, or whatever those things were, grabbed them as well. My friends were screaming for their lives, and by what I could tell, slowly dying. I screamed at the things. I didn't know what they wanted. And the next thing I saw was all three of them bringing my friends' bodies close to their gaping mouths. I couldn't watch it. All I felt I could do was run away. And I ran through the dark woods trying to be quiet while not looking back. And eventually, I got back to the hotel. I barely managed to get through the door before having a panic attack and falling to the floor. When I woke up, the coach, Mike, and the police were there. I told them everything I'd seen, and the police immediately went to the lake and began to search around the area, but they found absolutely nothing, not even my friend's clothes. I gave them my statement many times, but they didn't buy it, and neither did Mike or the coach. All my teammates were classified as missing, and still to this day, there's no clue about what happened to them. And for many years after that, I'd been called countless things, including crazy by their families, their ex-girlfriends, and many others for telling the truth. Unfortunately, the truth sometimes is too rare to believe. Fortunately, however, there is a group of people that do believe me. A small community online. I've spent the last 22 years trying to gather information. It turns out, after what happened to my friends, 2 other people had gone missing, last seen going to the lake. I managed to create a theory. It's not perfect, but, well, it's all I have. I believe the 3 women that we met in the woods that night were some sort of evil forest nymphs or fairies or what have you. And that's why they lured us into the lake, and that's why their appearance changed so drastically. I assume these fairies, or whatever they are, eat their victims. So, obviously, my friends are definitely dead. Whether or not they'll find their remains, well, I doubt that as well. They didn't up until this point. I know it's hard to believe that monsters may exist, and I never believed it up until that night. But I'm 100% sure of what I saw was not human.